let's get into this next story is tough, but I want you to know it's not just the UK. And it is just coincidence that I brought up Mark Thompson, who covered up for Jimmy Savile, who preyed on a whole bunch of children in the UK, because this next story about children being preyed on in the UK and being covered up from the highest realms is just another coincidence, everybody. And it doesn't go on in our country, right? What was that movie, The Sound of Freedom? All about other countries. All this goes on over there because the real people who run this country don't like you talking about what goes on in this country. It's highly inconvenient for them. But it's okay for us to tell you about it goes on over in the UK and bringing us this story, the sad story of Tommy Robinson, because, you know, I guess this originates with Tim being on Piers Morgan and Piers Morgan talking a lot of shit on Tommy Robinson. And I think this is probably, look, there's haters of Tim Pool, but he's a news carrier. It's like hating your paper boy for what's in the news, right? Tim thoughtfully composed his ideas and evidence and marshaled them in this video. This is probably one of the most professional videos I've seen him present, because otherwise it's all off the cuff beanie world stuff, right? This is thoughtfully composed and paints a more objectively realistic picture of Tommy Robinson. And that's like a pen name. That's not his real name. You'll hear his real name in this report, because I always thought it was just Tommy Robinson, right? Tommy was protesting the grooming of native indigenous UK kids by immigrant gangs of men who would gang rape them on a regular basis and kind of cover it up. And it was supported by law enforcement and the government, who was bringing the immigrants in. And anyway, they're trying to homogenize all the nations. They need to do that for international collectivism / communism to happen, right? They will still be rich and powerful beyond recognition, and you will no longer have a ladder to climb up through the markets and challenge them with your good ideas. They're cutting that all off. That's part of what the 2030 plan is. That's what the World Economic Forum plan is. That's really the Club of Rome plan. And the Club of Rome was founded by a bunch of billionaires who are, global barons, right? They're robber barons of the global variety. They are the grand theft world stealers, if you will. Nothing to do with Pittsburgh, right? But these people have plans on our lives. And the more educated we can become about that, the more we can be creative, something they have no capacity to control. We can be creative and inventive and ingenious and, find new ways to get things done that usurp their attempts to enslave us. If they make a cage, you figure out how to pick a lock. They make a better cage, you figure out how to pick a better lock, right? This has been the realm of humanity for 5,000 years. People who want slaves versus the people who don't want to be slaves. That's the gist of human history. So let's get into it. Let's hear about what has been going on for a long time in the UK that is separate, parallel, but also condoned and protected, just like they did the predator, Jimmy Savile.
Recently, I appeared on the Piers Morgan Uncensored show.
Equating Facebook or Twitter with the government, it is not a public square.
No, I'm not.
Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say. This is not a pendulum swing. If we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. The topics were supposed to be about Elon Musk and Greenland, big tech. And I think the show's pretty good. I'm a fan. But Tommy Robinson came up. And Piers Morgan had some choice accusations about who Tommy Robinson is.
Because he's managed to position himself very cleverly as this kind of freedom fighter who's only in prison because he blew the whistle on all this stuff. So they've silenced him by putting him in prison. None of that is true.
And then before we get into all that, the real story, of course, is not really about Tommy Robinson, though it sort of does involve him. It's about the covering up of what they call grooming gangs. One of the most shocking and horrifying stories I have ever heard in my life. This is a story about men who come from other countries and come to the UK and who have systematically for decades abused young girls, predominantly young white British girls. According to the Telegraph, this was covered up to protect the image of a successful multicultural society. Now, when this story came up, Piers Morgan says Tommy Robinson is a thug who's been accused of passport fraud and mortgage fraud and defamation. He's not in prison related to anything to do with these grooming gangs. My response? We don't believe you. Now, instantly, other panelists and Piers himself said, what did I get wrong? Well, I got to be honest, guys. I'm not the biographer of Tommy Robinson. I've talked to him on occasion, interviewed him about these issues, but admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about the accusations made by Piers Morgan. But I can tell you this, we don't believe you. But let me tell you a little bit about what we're seeing. And we're going to break down this story and talk about the actual claims against Tommy Robinson, because I think it's important we actually address them. But the reality is this. While there are many people who are saying Tim Pool got schooled on who Tommy Robinson really is, I don't know why you're even bringing that up when the Telegraph and other outlets are reporting that the UK government, from the police to the highest levels, knew little girls were being tortured. In fact, the transcripts that got released from these court cases are so shocking. I don't know that I can repeat them here. I mentioned it on the Piers Morgan show because I'm livid. Let me just put it as lightly as I can, because I know some of you listen to this podcast with kids around. Devices were inserted into little girls so that room could be made for men. That's putting it lightly, putting it very lightly. We're talking about 12-year-old girls. We're talking about rooms full of 10 to 20 guys, children. And guess what? In some instances, the police arrested the fathers of the victims. Because there we have it. If these men get arrested, well, you could be accused of being racist. But let's break all of this down. The reason why I said I don't believe you to Piers Morgan, well, it's because I'm looking at our president and how they accused him of criminal sexual abuse, of committing fraud, civil fraud, and falsifying business records. And when we look at all the cases, we can see it's fake. But let me pause. You know what I said to Piers? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know about Tommy, but I don't believe you because your government covered up this story. Piers agreed. I can respect that. But let's take a look at everything that's being claimed. Let's take a look at the greater details of what happened with this scandal and what's the truth about Tommy Robinson. For those of you that don't know what the grooming gangs are, the mainstream media claims the issue first came to widespread public attention through media investigations, notably by The Times in 2010, which exposed widespread child sexual exploitation in Rotherham, South Yorkshire. Except Tommy Robinson founded the English Defence League in 2009 to bring attention to the issue. Let's be clear. These grooming gangs are made up of majority Pakistani Muslim men that befriend young, vulnerable girls with gifts, alcohol, or drugs, followed by coercion into sexual acts, including gang rape. These acts often occurred in taxis, hotels, or houses, sometimes involving multiple abusers in a gang scenario. Let's break down the key investigations. Rotherham. A 2014 report by Professor Alexis J. concluded that around 1,400 children were exploited between 1997 and 2013. The report highlighted severe institutional failures by police and council services in addressing the crimes, partly due to fears of being accused of racism. Rockdale. Similar patterns were found where girls were left at the mercy of grooming gangs for years, with failures by local authorities noted. Telford. Another town where reviews indicated significant child sexual exploitation with little initial response from local authorities. Oxford. High-profile convictions occurred after Operation Bullfinch revealed a network of abusers. Now it is estimated that these gangs were operating in up to 50 different towns with upwards of 200,000 young girls exploited and abused. And in some instances, police were complicit. Now it is being estimated that these grooming gangs are operating in at least 50 towns with upwards of 200,000 young girls being exploited. And in some instances, local police were complicit in covering up these crimes. But it isn't just cops. It, as I mentioned, goes to the highest level. Recently, almost all of the Labour Party in the UK voted against a national inquiry into the scandal. Now, my friends, I live here in good old West Virginia. I don't live in the UK. So how do I even know about this story? Tommy Robinson. One man who had been highlighting the scandal while most of the UK was covering it up. His real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, goes by Tommy Robinson. To deflect blame, and rather than focus on the problem, certain politicians in the media turned their ire to Tommy while he's currently sitting in solitary confinement for 9 months for contempt of court. But more on that later. The mainstream media have labeled Tommy a thug, a criminal, and even a wife beater. So let's talk about who Tommy is and what is so awful about him. I think I may have met Tommy once when I was in the UK. I'm not quite sure, but I did interview him recently. And I know a lot of people who have worked with him. I know a lot of people who don't like him. And my assessment, I stand by what I said to peers. We don't believe you. I gotta be honest. We're gonna break it all down. But when you're talking about the systematic cover-up from the cops to the highest level of government, you expect me to believe that they're really going after Tommy for defamation? Come on, they're locking the dude up in prison. They accused him of inciting violence when he was on vacation. And I was watching the news and I saw nothing come from Tommy. So while they may make all these claims about him, I don't know. I asked my friends, let's break this all down, because this doesn't sound right. So here's Tommy. He grew up in Luton, a small town in England, quickly went from being a normal British town to majority non-white. The white ethnic group makes up 45.2% of the population of Luton, meaning there's a non-white majority in the town. The next largest ethnic group is Asian, which increased from 60,952 in 2011 to 83,325 in 2021. The Asian, also known as Middle Eastern, that's how they describe it in the UK, the group there makes up 37% of the population of Luton. Over time, Tommy says his neighborhood changed drastically, and not in a good way. His cousin was a victim of a grooming gang. Tommy took to the streets organizing demonstrations, printing out leaflets, highlighting the problems with the grooming gangs and Islamic extremism. From there, he started a group called the English Defense League. And this is where the slander starts. The slander of Tommy. The English Defense League grew so big and spread to towns and cities became increasingly out of control. And when Nazis infiltrated in 2013, Tommy disbanded the organization. But let's go over the allegations. Assaulting an officer. Before his activism, when he was about 19, in 2004, Tommy and his wife, then his girlfriend, were having an argument leaving a club and a bar when an off-duty cop decided to physically intervene. The cop assaulted Tommy first. Tommy won the fight, but at the end, kicked the man in the head. Yeah, he probably shouldn't have done that. Robinson was convicted of assault, occasioning actual bodily harm, and assault with intent to resist arrest against an off-duty officer in July of 2004. Robinson received sentences of 12 months and 3 months, which were served concurrently. This is where the false allegations of woman abuse come into play. People assume that Tommy was being physical with his girlfriend. He was not. Had he been, he would have been arrested and charged for that. However, there are no such charges on his record. In September of 2011, at Preston Magistrates Court, Robinson was convicted of assault for headbutting a man in Blackburn on the 2nd of April 2011. In November 2011, he was given a 12-week jail term, suspended for 12 months. A neo-Nazi showed up at an EDL rally here. Nazis were never welcome and decided to cause trouble. Tommy and the man got into an altercation. Tommy was arrested. Let's talk about the claims of mortgage fraud. They were trying to string him up after he started the EDL. Just like Trump, anxious to silence Tommy, they went routing through his whole life. They found that a family member overinflated their wages and was given money for the down payment by Tommy on a house. Tommy was told if he took responsibility, they would stop going after his family, so he took the deal. You can see from the court documents, he's not even the person that applied for the mortgage. So Tommy lent his brother-in-law money to buy a house, and that's a crime 2 years after the fact, and the bank got their money. The same stitch-up they did to Trump. He wasn't even the mortgage applicant. Now again, I don't need to sit here and defend Tommy Robinson. By all means, you can criticize the guy. That's always allowed. But make sure you're criticizing him appropriately for things that are actually, related to the ongoing scandal. Piers Morgan wants to say this guy's not some Nelson Mandela figure. Oh, sure. Tommy's had his run-ins with the law. But I gotta be honest. When I say I don't believe it, I think that's fair. They claim that Donald Trump engaged in civil fraud. He went to the bank and he overinflated the size of his penthouse. Yeah. And they put him on trial for it, and they said he owes him hundreds of millions of dollars. The only problem? Anybody who does real estate business knows When you offer up a disclosure on your properties, there's a disclaimer. We may have gotten some of these things wrong, and you have to do your due diligence. Well, guess what happened? The bank that gave the loans did their due diligence and said, hey, those numbers are off. And Trump said, okay. And the bank went, we're going to give you a little bit less money. And Trump went, okay. And that was it. So I can't talk about every little detail or every little conspiracy theory, whatever. Fine, so be it. But understand where I'm coming from. Sure, Tommy Robinson may have gotten into a fight, but if he's not even listed as the guy who bought the mortgage, for what purpose is any of this happening? Now, I interviewed Tommy Robinson not that long ago. I told him, bro, if you go back to the UK, they're going to arrest you. And they did. The dude was on vacation, and they claimed he was inciting violence. I remember this story back in 2017. Robinson was charged with contempt of court and convicted. According to Wikipedia, which, oh yeah, we know it's super reliable, it states he had filmed inside Canterbury Crown Court and posted prejudicial statements calling the defendants Muslim child rapists while the jury was deliberating. Judge Heather Norton said Robinson used pejorative language in his broadcast and prejudged the outcome of the trial and could have had the effect of substantially derailing the trial. Clearly from the video, you can see that's not true. The only people that said anything defamatory was the defendants. Also notice some of these guys had their prison bags. The trial was over. The defendants were there to receive sentencing. The whole thing about collapsing a trial was a farce. When you look into the facts, it appears Tommy was convicted of journalism. Yeah, he was there highlighting the issue that they had been trying to cover up. So again, we don't believe you. He checked with the court on the day that he filmed. There was no court reporting restrictions posted, as they're supposed to be on the courtroom door. And the clerk said that there was none that they were aware of. Then all he did was ask, how do you feel about your verdict? It's all on video, nothing defamatory said. And if it was with the UK speech laws, he would have been arrested for that. Instead, he was originally arrested without reason. Then the charge changed to breach of the peace and causing emotional stress to the defendants. 18 hours later, they finally went with breach of court reporting restrictions. To follow came the lies that Piers Morgan repeated. Not to mention he served time for this, only to have a judge eventually say that the government was wrong. Additionally, the trial was never at risk of collapse. Total BS. But you know what? I'll add this. Piers didn't mention that the case was adjourned after 2 months of solitary confinement and referred back to the Attorney General, only never to be brought again because it was all a sham. Look, I remember watching videos of Tommy Robinson coming out of prison gaunt and disheveled, not being fed properly. Whatever you want to claim about the guy, there's videos I've seen, and we know the UK government covered this up, and the Labour Party does not want an inquiry. So what am I supposed to believe? That some guy is massively famous with huge rallies accidentally? He's just some guy who engages in fraud and con artistry that tricked his way into rallying all of these people to call out a widespread problem that the mainstream media now admits was happening the whole time? Okay, fine. Live in whatever world you want to live in, okay? You can say all the things about Tommy. I don't know literally everything. I can only convey what I've seen, what I've read, what I've learned. I can just tell you, we don't believe you. I think the issue is that Tommy draws attention. He can rally people. And when you're desperately trying to cover this up because you don't want to appear racist, why would you let this guy keep doing what he's doing? Truth be told, then, how would anyone stop him? Well, as I said, truth be told, they'd stop him exactly in this way. Smear, lie, cheat, etc. I've never interacted with Tommy in any way having anything to do with these accusations against him. Again, I don't know a lot about the guy, but I interviewed him and we talked about an issue that was important. So it comes back to this. If Piers or anybody else wants to insult Tommy, my response is, so what? I don't know. I don't care. Explain to me why the one guy that was leading rallies to call out to the systemic rape of children was getting locked up and silenced and put in jail. Why weren't you doing it? Why wasn't the UK government doing it? Why weren't the cops doing it? Why was it Tommy Robinson? Oh, he's a con artist? Well, whoop-de-freaking-do. At least we had one con artist, according to you, willing to speak up and inform someone like me. So, I'll say it again. I like Piers, I really do. I've been on the show several times. I look forward to going on again. And maybe he just doesn't understand. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe it's intentional. I don't know. But don't you get it? This is why I don't believe you. The things they were doing to these children, man. These transcripts that came out. They fill me with a rage I have never experienced. The horrors. Man, there's so much dirty stuff in this world. And you say Tommy's a con artist. Fine, whatever. At least I can thank the con artist for letting me know, because I would not have known about this if it were not for him. So what? Oh, but he defamed someone. Don't care. Literally don't care. The dude could rob a bank. He could go in and rob a bank, and I'd be like, at least the bank robber told me the truth. I'm so sick of these people who lie, cheat, and steal. And then they deflect. When they say Tommy's not this figure, I'm like, whatever, man. Why are you deflecting? Talk to me about how your government did this. So let's break down why he's actually in prison right now. Back in 2018, a video went viral of a boy pouring water over a Syrian kid's face in a playground. The whole world attacked the white boy, Bailey, calling him racist. Tommy started getting messages about the Syrian child was the instigator. Tommy drove to the town, met with Bailey and his mother to get his side of the story. Same thing. This was a simple playground fight that had been elevated to national attention because of the boy's ethnicity. I actually have a personal source who says they were there during the interview and the family was terrified and there were Muslim men surrounding them. It was a terrifying situation for everybody. The media ruined Bailey's life. It's just like the Covington kid scandal, including Piers Morgan. Piers admitted that he made a mistake after reading the court transcripts from Tommy's trial, claiming the incident was not race-induced. Tommy took to Bailey's defense and conducted interviews all across the town where this occurred. Mohammed Tasnimeh Akunji, defense attorney for the UK ISIS bride, was quick to jump on a case of defamation, suing Tommy for over $1 million. The judge in this case dismissed the 5 witnesses Tommy brought, most of which were children that traveled hours to London under threat of backlash from the Muslim community, some of which didn't even agree with Tommy's politics, only to have the judge claim their stories didn't hold up. Also conveniently left out was that the Syrian boy brought a knife and a screwdriver to school, and his school records were not considered. Tommy told the court that he did a documentary with all the evidence he presented, and what he wasn't allowed to present was ready to go for the public. The judge banned Tommy from releasing the documentary under penalty of contempt of court. Tommy believed it was in the public interest to release this information to make sure people knew. And thanks to Elon Musk restoring Tommy's account, his documentary Silenced has 150 million views. And then the Attorney General, politically appointed, decided to bring the contempt charges. It's clear that Tommy is in prison for speech because it's speech they don't like. Don't believe me? Fine. Think that I'm wrong? Fine. But as the Telegraph reported, they covered this up. So when Tommy puts out a documentary, how am I supposed to believe he is this evil man you claim him to be? Now, it's important to note Tommy was never arrested for leading a riot. Not to mention with UK speech laws on hate speech, Tommy has never been arrested for hate speech. Seems to me, when you look into the guy, he's not a perfect saint or anything like that. I don't know who is. But like Trump, he's an inconvenience. He's speaking out on issues that they don't want him to speak out on. They want to create an image of successful multiculturalism. And you can't have a working class guy coming around rallying people to call out the government in this way. As the saying goes, I'll paraphrase it, but it's dangerous to be right in places where the government is wrong. And what's the other one we love? In an empire of lies, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I am not somebody who simply looks at the headline and says, thus it is true. Remember the Covington kids? Yeah, they were standing in the Lincoln Memorial. A Native American started banging a drum in a kid's face, and everybody blamed the kid. I'm not jumping the gun on this. So by all means, come to me. Tell me that Tommy Robinson did this, that, or otherwise. And my response to you will be the same. First of all, you're probably lying. Maybe some of it's true, maybe it's not. But I will then say, as I've already stated, oh, thank you, con man, for informing me of the evils and the depravity of the UK government. Boy, is that inconvenient for that government. But I think I made my point, okay? There is a problem in the UK. And there's a problem here in the US too, especially with our illegal immigration. And there are governments, be it the US or the UK, that are covering up these crimes. We know in the United States, thanks to Dr. Phil of all people, that children are being pulled across the border with numbers on their arms, and CBP officers are sending them to sex traffickers. We want answers. We want accountability. So here's what I will leave you with. Piers Morgan tells me these things on his show. I say, fine, but we don't believe you. Because here in the United States, when we deal with these problems, the Democrats, neocons, the government, they lie about it. They accuse Trump of wrongdoing, 34 felony counts, despite the fact those felony counts are beyond their statute of limitations. And then when I see a facsimile in the UK, my conclusion is, stands to reason, you are liars and you are covering up for evil. Thanks for hanging out, man. I don't have all the answers for you. I'm not psychic. I can't see the future.
Deep state's going to deep state. I mean, immigration problem is going on in Europe, in the UK, in America. It's an international thing. It's like a COVID type of thing. It's like a pandemic, right? These globalist strategies, common core all over the world, not just in America. So, they got a lot going on, and most people don't know any better, and they know you don't know any better.
Yep. And Tommy's, he's controversial. He's
for sure.
But even amongst like the truth community, he's like very controversial too. Cause,
Well, he's like that dude, Nick.
Fuentes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, but kind of on the opposite side though, where like Tommy Robinson's like super like pro-Israel, like to the point where everyone's like,
they would all get. I'd like to see Nick Fuentes, Owen Benjamin, and Tommy Robinson having beers.
Well, exactly. Let's all sit down and just hash it out.
They wouldn't be talking necessarily what they agree about. They would start like, okay, so you support Israel, and you'd get to the other stuff, right?
Totally
interesting.
Totally. Well, apparently, so Owen's famous for writing a song about Tommy Robinson, and then Tommy invited Owen out to the UK to go perform that song at one of his rallies. And then Tommy Robinson got the call, was like, "Hey, bro, Owen makes fun of everybody, right?" And when I say everybody, I mean everybody.
Yeah.
And so Tommy said, "Oh, sorry, man, I can't have you at the thing after all, because you make fun of everybody, which includes one certain demographic of people."
Yeah, you can't.
So,
you can't make fun of everybody.
So anyway, so there was that. But then at the same time, too, that's not to throw the baby out the bathwater, because like there is, legitimate stuff to uncover with this whole situation. And then it's the classic thing that we talk about all the time on the show, the DARVO, where it's you deny, attack, reverse victim offender. So it's the people who are victimized turn out to be the ones that get arrested,
arresting
or
the
thrown under
dads
the
of the
bus.
victims.
Exactly, like that type of stuff. So that's like, it just shows you this tactic that is utilized constantly from people that like to think of themselves as being in power to completely diminish the claims of anybody who is a true victim, and embolden the people who are, in this case, these are agendas. These are agendas that are being played out. And by whether it's like these rape gangs are let loose to do it, like how conscientious that actual, like, are they sitting around saying like, hey, we need to get some rape gangs going, or if that's just the consequence of just like letting the floodgates open and letting these people come in.
Part of it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Things that are accepted where they come from, right? Like there was those famous tourists that were traveling around, they got hit by a rape gang, right? So like not every place is like America, first off, right? And then when you get into like the police and the authorities protecting it, because it'd be racist to do anything about it. Those are the same police and authorities that, protected Jim O'Fix-It. He had a kids show for a long time. They put him up as the poster child for the BBC's connection with kids, right? And it's not just like, oh, somebody wrote an edgy article on Steam It. Let me show you a few, right? Lawyer's letter puts dent in Mark Thompson's Savile denial. Oh, interesting. That one just has an ad now. I was going through a search. BBC blame game. Jimmy Savile scandal. Former BBC boss Mark Thompson lied over Savile evidence, Nick Pollard claims. As scandal flared, BBC leaders missed red flags for 20 years. They got this big ad. What do they got? New York Times chief Mark Thompson leaves sex abuse scandal at BBC. Incoming New York Times boss said he had no knowledge of allegations that one of Britain's biggest stars was a serial abuser of children. Not very good at the news game, but you're in charge of a news agency twice. Interesting. Fascinating. Mark Thompson challenged over Jimmy Savile, Channel 4 News, right? They're like getting in front of him on the street. Jimmy Savile scandal, Mark Thompson at BBC. Jimmy Savile, ex-BBC head Mark Thompson has regrets. Not after he gets to the New York Times, though. Covers up a little Pizzagate. That's good. So anyway, these are things you can find by doing little searches like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I had no idea about this. I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
Further
I mean, that's how they
investigation.
can know so fast that there was nothing to be seen there and that only crazy conspiracy theorists would look into Pizzagate.
Yep.
They would only crazy conspiracy theorists actually look at the evidence in WikiLeaks of the people and what they said and what they were doing, right? And to like put the ick on that situation, they concocted a whole bunch of, how do you say, straw man elements, things that are not true, right? They make this egregious jump to conclusion that Hillary Clinton herself was abusing children in the pizza place. That is not the story, but that's what they made the story into, right? And that's what drew that guy from North Carolina to drive there to protect children he thought were in the pizza place and not, you know, maybe in the hot tub waiting for people to come over, as those other emails allude to, right? You think they're just doing it in the pizza place? Like, that's simplistic idea. But that simplistic idea was put out there not by the people researching it, but by the people trying to cover it up, right? So even that crazy guy who drove there and shot the hard drive conveniently for them, he was given not the accurate set of data to work from. Otherwise, he wouldn't be driving there to do such things, right? He might have read a Media Matters version of events and been really concerned. I doubt that, though.
Yeah, you know, and it's
Probably not a
really
David Brock fan.
probably not. But you know that strategy of, you know, poisoning the well, you know, a legitimate story or something that should be investigated, you know, it gets conflated with something that turns out to not be true, and then that becomes the thing, you know, that they build the fact checkers build the straw man arguments around to debunk the entire thing when there is stuff to be examined and looked at in the original case, you know. And I think this is a strategy that gets used all the time. I see it. I saw it all throughout COVID. I
Yeah,
saw
put
it
the
just
ick on people. They put the
yeah,
ick on Tommy
yep,
Robinson. He's got,
yep.
oh, he's a woman beater. He did some stuff with the mortgage, whatever the thing is. That's just putting the ick on him, right? They could put the ick on you in a variety of ways, right? And I could, you know, we could list them. They could put some stuff on your hard drive. They could
Oh,
say,
totally.
like, they could ghost you, AI, deep fake you in some footage, right? Like all, and by the way, all this stuff's been done in movies too, to tell you, the
Yeah.
audience, that they can do this to you.
Yep.
Parallel construction, use a set of surveillance evidence over here to create a hypothetical crime over here that they can pin you for, right? Some of the people getting pardoned by Trump were set up like that. Maybe we'll get those news stories and interviews in the coming years of Trump's presidency. But there's a whole bunch of different ways. They could say you were involved with cheese pizza, right? That's the
Oh
way to
yeah.
put ick on people. Now, if they didn't have a cheese pizza and their pizza party logo at the Comet Ping Pong place from the DNC leaks and the Hillary Clinton leaks, I would not know about such things. They did it first. They had it in their emails to be like, what is this? What is this? And who are these people involved? And what else have they said about children along in their messaging to each other? There was substantial reason to scratch your head and say, really? Maybe I'm misconstruing this, right? So there are elements of the things that go on that we have not been privy to. And that is the ever evolving front of the knowledge war versus those who want to suppress and censor useful knowledge to enslave you, to enslave your mind. And we must emancipate ourselves from that mental slavery, as Bob Marley said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, kind of the main thing I was gonna just point out is something that I've seen a lot even lately. The idea of like, yes, so conflating it with something different. Like it's a lot less conspicuous than like planting cheese pizza on people. Like that's like an extreme case. But I'm talking more like just on a day-to-day, day in and day out, very subtle way that I think that they actually attack us is they release information and they know that we're going to latch onto it and share it as if it's true, and then it's easily either debunkable or it comes out very quickly that it's not true, and then that's something that we discredit ourselves with if we share it. So like we're entering an era where this information is just it's just coming at us the psyops are just out of control these days. So as researchers, as content creators, as people social media, whatever the case may be, we have to be extra, extra, extra diligent in double checking everything. Like if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And like always double checking, fact checking. Like if I get even the slightest tinge that something's like, that might be fake, I look it up, and most of the time it really is. Even just lately, this last week, I've seen this shared multiple times. It's like a screenshot of a headline that says, I got it right here, but it's basically like, why didn't the anti-vaxxers do a better job of, it says, they knew. Why didn't the unvaccinated do more to warn us? That's the headline. The unvaccinated knew what we didn't. Some of them said too little. Most said nothing at all. A lot of blood is now on their hands. That's like
Oh,
the headline.
really?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's like the
So
screen.
you could
Well,
listen
I
to
know.
Grand Theft World Episode 7, get
That's what
yourself
I'm
all
saying.
knowledgeified. That
That's what
means
I'm saying.
learned on the evidence that existed since about 2012 that creates a sequential timeline of events leading up to the event where they said, the only thing that would close the world down is a global novel coronavirus type of event. And then they happen to have the thing on the shelf in the lab at the time when they made that plan. And then it trickled down to you and your family, and no one told you about it. And that's
I know.
called national security.
Well, see, that's
At
the
work
thing. That's the
right
thing.
there.
It's like that
Yeah.
that headline's supposed to outrage you and get a response like that, but it's a
Yeah.
parody. It's a joke headline.
Yeah,
It's
I'm sure.
supposed to elicit that.
Sure.
And so all these people, I've been seeing them share it,
Yeah.
outrage, like how dare you, that
Yeah.
response. But it's supposed to elicit that because it's a joke parody website, and so
Well, it's pretty
stuff like
funny.
that.
All those
It's,
people that
it's
died,
very hilarious. It's
the
very
grandparents that didn't get to see their family on their way out. Can you imagine living 80 or 90 years, being in some nice nursing home, being well cared for, and then they treat you like you're a leper and let you fucking starve to death, or they put you on a
Yep.
ventilator, high pressure, low oxygen, so you can fucking die, and your family gets billed for it or the state gets billed for it. Can you imagine that the center that you're in is getting paid by the state or the governor to fucking kill you and
Yep.
walk away and run for the president a couple years later and shit? Like, that is not what those people signed up for. And it was a fucking shitty way for all those people to go out, let alone the healthy and semi-healthy people who caught part of whatever the fucking lab leak biological weapon that they put out there. But the real trick was, the real bioweapon is the gene therapy, and they had to have the other thing to trigger you to want to go get it. Just like they needed the Facebook to get all your personal data and your photos and your communications. So they're pretty good at what they do. They've been doing it a long time. They exist. They're good at what they do. Either you want to educate yourself and resist, or you're okay being a slave, right? If you're watching this show, you're not okay being a slave. You are a prisoner trying to escape, and a prisoner will dig their way through a fucking brick wall with a spoon for 20 years in order to escape. No one's ever going to convince that prisoner that they're a slave. But there are many people here on the plantation that are just fine with how things are run, and they like being a slave.
Totally.
Leave them to Jesus.
Yep. We're not okay with slavery around here, folks.
We're not okay with slavery. We are 21st century abolitionists. And I think freedom's for everybody. And freedom goes with entrepreneurism. And those two things together amount to what America used to be before it got infested with globalization and internationalist ideas of a very un-American variety over the past 80 years.
Totally.
But we can still do something about it.
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures. They're hosting videos, they're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man.
No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.